They weren't engines. They weren't weapons. And they weren't supposed to exist without a guardian, yet there they were, two alien puppy twins, curled beneath a dead shuttle. Shaking so violently the metal floor shivered with them. Jox Rourke had come to the scrapyard for spare parts, but the moment those frightened bioluminescent eyes locked onto him, he realized one brutal truth. He hadn't found broken pups. He'd found someone else's discarded crime. And if he didn't save them right now, they wouldn't survive the next 10 minutes. Jox Rourke had seen broken things his entire life. Broken engines, broken stations, broken people. But he had never seen anything quite as heartbreakingly fragile as the two tiny alien pups curled beneath the rusted wing of an abandoned shuttle. They were shaking so hard the metal floor trembled with them. Jox had only come to the scrapyards of Bennett 9 to strip a few plasma coils before the scavenger gangs arrived. The sun was setting, tinting the dunes violet. Dried coolant glittered like spilled stardust. The place smelled of burnt circuitry and loneliness. Then he heard it. A thin, high-pitched, keening-like static filtered through tears. Jox dropped his toolkit, slid beneath the shuttle wing, and froze. Two small creatures huddled together, pressed so tightly their ribs shook in sync. Their bodies were like soft midnight fur, mottled with faint bioluminescent freckles that flickered with their fear. 4 small ears each. Thin tails wrapped around each other like braided wires. Their eyes enormous and glassy, glowed a trembling blue. Elith pups. Rare, expensive, and almost never found without a guardian. What in the stars happened to you? Jox whispered. The twins flinched. He raised both hands slowly. Hey, easy. No one's touching you. Their shivering didn't stop. Their pupils thinned. Their freckles flickered dangerously stress response. Eliths could literally shake themselves into cardiac collapse if terror went unchecked. Jox had dealt with overheating reactors that were calmer than these two. He slid off his jacket, placed it gently on the ground, and moving inch by inch, laid it beside them. The pups sniffed it. One tiny nose touched the fabric. Then, as if making a monumental decision, they crawled into the jacket's folds. Still trembling, still clinging to each other, Jox swallowed. All right, little sparks. Let's get you out of here. He wrapped the jacket loosely so they wouldn't feel trapped. They curled tighter, but didn't resist. He carried them back to his hauler, voice low and steady, telling them stories of engines he'd restored and ships he'd outraced, just to keep his tone warm enough that they might anchor to it. The pups whimpered the whole way. Inside his ship, the Emberleaf Jox activated a warming cradle, the kind designed for delicate circuitry. It became an improvised nest. The pups curled into the heat but still trembled violently. Jox frowned. Okay, this is more than fear. He scanned them. The results hit him like a wrench to the teeth. They weren't just abandoned, they were chemically destabilized. Someone had tried to suppress their Elith bonding instinct, an illicit process used by smugglers to make young aliens easier to transport. The procedure was outlawed by every civilized world. Black market traders never cared. And the twins hadn't just been scared, they'd been emotionally severed. Their biology needed a stabilizing bond. Otherwise, their nervous systems would overload. No wonder you're shaking, he murmured. You're terrified and alone. And someone stole the part of your mind that knows how to connect. This wasn't a mechanical problem, but he was a mechanic and mechanics improvised. Carefully, he lifted one pup. It squeaked, eyes huge. The other cried out in distress. Jox pressed the pup against his chest, near his heartbeat. Easy, just listen. I'm not going to hurt you. The trembling spiked, then slowed. Just a bit. The second pup scrambled onto his lap. Burying itself against him, as if afraid he'd disappeared, Jox leaned back against the wall, holding both pups close until their violent shaking faded to weak shivers. Hours passed. When their eyes finally closed, tiny breaths evening out, Jox dared to hope they might survive the night. The twins, whom he later named Nova and Pulse, stayed asleep until dawn. When they woke, they stared at Jox with that eerie Elith stillness, assessing him with luminous eyes. Then Nova crawled into his palm. Pulse followed. Jax laughed softly. "Oh no, you're bonding, aren't you?" They chirped. Eliths didn't choose lightly. Once bonded, they stayed loyal for life. Entire star clans revered them as companions, guardians, and navigators. For two to bond with a human was absurd, but they had. And Jox wasn't the type to leave something he fixed half done over the next days. He fed them nutrient mush, repaired their neural damage with careful gene stims, and let them sleep pressed to his chest, where the rhythmic beating calmed them. Their freckles brightened. Their ears perked at the sound of his voice. They even started trying to mimic his tools, stealing bolts, chirping at power wrenches, and clambering onto his shoulders whenever he worked. One evening, as he tightened a coolant chamber, Nova suddenly froze, ears flat, pulse hissed. Jax felt it too, vibrations through the floor. The scrapyard perimeter sensors had tripped Scavenger Gang, the kind that trafficked exotic creatures. The twins bolted behind him, shaking so hard the air shimmered around their bodies. Their fear was so intense, their freckles flickered like warning lights. Jox stood. "No one's taking you again." The gang approached, armed, grinning, claiming the pups were merchandise that belonged to them. Jax cracked his knuckles. "You left them to die. They're under my protection now." 5 thugs. 1 human mechanic, but Jox had 2 advantages. A ship built like a steel fist, and 2 tiny aliens who had finally stopped shaking because they were angry. Nova and Pulse leapt onto the hauler's controls, chirping combat patterns encoded in their species' instincts. Eliths weren't just cute, they could manipulate local EM fields. The air erupted in static. The gang's weapons jammed. The ground vibrated. Jade grinned. "Good pups." Then he charged, wrench swinging. The fight was messy, loud and short. Scavengers fled into the dunes, weapons sparking uselessly. When silence returned, Jox looked at the twins. They were panting, freckles glowing bright and proud. "You two are something else," he said. They launched themselves into his arms. This time, they weren't shaking, they were humming. News of Jox's rescue spread across Bennett 9, then the system, then farther. Elith clans sent envoys, offering him wealth beyond reason in exchange for the pups, but Nova and Pulse pressed to his chest every time someone asked to take them, and Jox only had one answer: "They stay with me." The Elith envoys bowed. "Then you are their chosen. Their guardian, their family." Jox swallowed past the lump in his throat. He looked down at Nova and Pulse's little sparks, once abandoned, now brilliant with life. "Family, huh?" he murmured. "Yeah, I can do that." And as he carried them aboard the Emberleaf, the twins curled around his neck, warm, soft, and finally safe. They didn't shake anymore. They glowed.